What's up, my beautiful people? Because the world won't get any better on its own, we're back again with another daily dose of Reddit Hope and Happy, to try and make your life at least a little brighter. Going back into r/AskReddit again today, where defendants really need to learn their right against self-incrimination. So, let's get to it. Alright, so the AskReddit question was, lawyers of Reddit, what was your oh crap moment in court? I was involved in a pretty messy custody case. The other party was a mess and had kept the child from my client for a few weeks. They were playing lots of stupid games and kept requesting continuances. I requested a drug test, which the judge ordered. However, they didn't show up for it. To clarify, he did show up, he just stood in front of the toilet for literally 2 hours and claimed he couldn't pee. I was representing the plaintiff, so the burden was on me. I called multiple witnesses that testified to the defendant's drug use. So opposing counsel decides to call their client for direct examination and asks, "You don't use heroin and crack, right?" That is, for the non-lawyers, a very stupid question for many reasons, especially considering his client didn't show up for his drug test. However, I fully expected the defendant to just lie and say he was clean. After the question was asked, there was a really long pause and the defendant said, "Yes, I do both of those drugs." My head almost exploded. I didn't ask any questions on cross-examination because I didn't want to muddy the waters. I won and the child is doing great. Oh, I feel for the defense counsel there. Oh my gosh. Frick, why would you do that? I was in court for driving while suspended in a county and in front of a judge that were both notorious for putting people who did that in jail. My license wasn't supposed to be suspended. A pencil pusher forgot to push a button or something and it never got unsuspended after the time was up. I had proof of this. I was still really nervous. The guy who went up to the judge before me walked to the table where we were supposed to stand, sat down, and put his feet up on the table. The judge asked him what he was doing, and he gave a flippant answer and basically told the judge to go screw himself. This seriously ticked the judge off. The judge went off on this guy, and the guy gave everything right back to him, ticking him off more and more. The judge ended up jailing him for contempt and had the bailiff cuff the guy and put him in a chair off to the side to await the marshals who would transport him to the jail. My name gets called. The judge is looking at me like I'm fresh meat and he is a great white shark. I'm already thinking to myself, okay, if this judge puts you in jail, run over and beat the crap out of the guy that ticked the judge off so badly. He's why you're going to jail. The judge looks down at his paperwork and back at me and says, "You're Mr. my last name." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Yeah, we were talking about you earlier. I'm going to void your arrest and dismiss the case. Your license was supposed to be valid and you shouldn't be here." I let out a huge sigh. The judge asked me if I was okay, and I said I had been a bit worried, especially given the guy that was right before me in line. The judge said, "Don't worry about him. He won't be seeing anything that isn't behind bars for about 90 days, and laughed. Oh, yeah, you're... My gosh. It just reminds me of that, gosh, who was it? I'm forgetting the name of the defendant in that case. I want to say it was like Denver Allen or something like that. But the animators behind Rick and Morty actually took the court transcript from that case and animated that entire thing because the transcript was just so insane. I'm fairly positive his name is Denver Allen. It is full of profanity, but my goodness, it is hilarious the way that this guy just goes at the judge. I mean, terrible, but hilarious at the same time. Anyway, if you have time, I'd suggest looking it up. I'm not a lawyer, but I was a character witness for my childhood dog in a civil trial between our neighbors and my parents. Opening counsel was questioning me. I wasn't even out of elementary school at the time. And he asked if our dog was aggressive. She was a Rottweiler and very loving and incredibly protective of me and my siblings. His final question to me is one I will never forget. He asked, "Did your father tell you what to say before you came into court today?" I responded, "Yes." Then he asked, "What did he tell you to say?" I said, "The truth." Now, I was too young to remember the courtroom reaction, but according to my father, the judge audibly guffawed and the opposing counsel lost all of the wind out of his sails. Oh, that's just sweet. That's just sweet. Not a lawyer, but I was on a jury once for a murder trial, got selected, and the trial started almost immediately. A man was being charged with murdering his neighbor. They made their opening statements, there was even a bloody note. It wasn't terribly long, but they clearly put a lot of effort into their strategies and were ready for battle. First witness was called. It was the son of the man on trial. I forget the first question, but it didn't matter. He immediately broke down crying and invoked his Fifth Amendment right. Everyone freaks out. Judge and lawyers were like, what the frick? Jury had no clue what was going on, but we were quickly ushered out immediately after that. A few minutes later, it was explained to us what happened. The judge declared a mistrial. The prosecutor must have suspected that the father was taking the fall for the son, who actually murdered the neighbor. Rather than risk losing, there was a mistrial where they sorted out who to actually charge and try. Wow. My goodness. Oh, frick. Taking that kind of a fall for your kid? Man. Not a lawyer. Wife is, but she was just watching. Making his statement before the sentencing, the defendant, who molested a stepdaughter, her friend, and a niece, pulled a knife from who knows where and stabbed himself twice before getting wrestled to the ground. How he got it through the metal detector, no one knows. He lived through that, but died 2 months later in prison of natural causes. Yes, I'm sure. Natural causes. Yeah, child molesters don't tend to last long in prison. The best oh crap moments are when your opposing counsel or opposing client says or does something that wins the case for you. True, in civil cases, you usually know what will happen ahead of time, but in my state discovery and smaller civil cases, it's more limited, and clients don't always want to spend $30,000 when we can get the same result for $10,000. In an adverse possession case, the witness only needed to say, "I used that area as my backyard, and I fully expected him to say this." It would harm my case, but I knew that I could get around it. When asked about his use of the area, he said, "No, I never really went back there, didn't use it at all." Lost the case for the other side, and I could barely keep a straight face. It was completely opposite of what the witness had told opposing counsel off the record. Apparently, the under penalty of perjury made him change his story. I had another case about losing a multi-unit dwelling insurance policy because a guy's place was a fire hazard. I asked him if his personal insurer knew about the fire hazard. Yeah, and the jerks canceled my policy. I also love it when I have a difficult party on the other side and the judge rips them a new one. I had a convoluted case with a lot of parties about nothing at all. The plaintiff was heinous. The 6 or 7 attorneys were working out calendars with the judge when the plaintiff starts yelling at her attorney from across the courtroom because she didn't like that he had conceded some little non-issue. Judge told her to sit down and shut up. I was sad that that case settled because she would have been amazing on the stand. Oh my gosh. I'm not a lawyer, but a court case I was involved with went this way. My ex-mother-in-law was crazy. Me and my wife at the time had cut her off almost completely. Every once in a while, she would give in and let her mom visit, which always turned out badly. Eventually, we got divorced and I got full custody. Mother-in-law went nuts and decided to sue me for custody. I looked over the law, and for any form of visitation or custody, you need to have had contact in the last 6 months, and she hadn't seen them for over a year. So we go to court. I can't afford a lawyer, but the law was pretty clear. She goes through 3 lawyers, each of them quit in turn. So she finally winds up representing herself. During the last hearing, she was talking to the judge and said something to the effect of, "I don't want to get custody of them, I just want to be able to visit." The judge then asked her point blank, "This is a custody hearing. Are you telling me you no longer want to get custody?" She said yes, and the judge dismissed the case immediately. And that is a prime example of shooting yourself in the foot. Follow up on that though, just for closure here. So did she ever sue for a visitation? No. By that time, I had succeeded in fully cutting her off. She was straight up crazy. The ex brought my kids to her mother's house for a weekend shortly before we got divorced, while I was deployed overseas. Mother-in-law wound up accusing every male they knew of raping them because the 2.5-year-old pointed at his junk and said, "Papa." When my ex came to get them, her mother refused to give up the kids. My mom went with the ex and helped grab the kids, and mother-in-law then called the cops on them. When the cops said that she can't hold the kids, she called the cops on the cops. That worked about as well as you'd think. So by the time the court case was over, I'd cut any and all ties. We'd moved and kept ourselves unlisted in the phone book for a decade. She's dead now, so there is no chance she'll show up again. Wow. Frick, talk about a crazy mother-in-law. Medical malpractice defense lawyer here, representing hospitals and doctors. This was not my oh crap moment, but plaintiff's oh crap moment. For context, usually at trial, both plaintiff and defendant will have an expert physician testify as to their opinion to whether the doctor/hospital performed everything correctly. I thoroughly researched the plaintiff's expert, who was an OBGYN, baby delivery, and found out he had been suspended a number of times for his own botched deliveries and giving incorrect medical testimony to help plaintiff's cases. During the actual day of the trial, turns out he was not licensed to practice medicine independently without supervision from another physician, and he was 1 year into his 3-year suspension. Plaintiff's lawyers had no idea about their own expert's background, and they just sat there with a blank look on their face. Needless to say, during cross-examination, we destroyed his credibility and won at trial. Oh my gosh. Not me, but my former law partner. She was in court representing a client, I think in a hearing for a restraining order against her soon-to-be ex-husband. Our client was telling the judge that when they met to exchange the children for visitation, the ex had kicked her. He immediately, angrily shouted, "She can't prove it! I didn't leave a mark!" Thanks, buddy. Represented a woman charged with multiple very serious felonies. She insisted that in the months before the offense, she'd been seriously dating one of the detectives who ultimately wound up investigating and testifying in her case. For a variety of reasons, I trusted this client and believed her, even though the detective never disclosed the relationship in his report. So, during his testimony, I asked, "Detective Smith, you had a romantic relationship with Miss Defendant, correct?" He goes, "What? No," and is visibly offended. The judge looks at me like I've lost my mind. The Commonwealth attorney audibly says, "What?" I'm freaking out because a large part of my cross and argument was focused on the bias formed by the prior relationship, and now I've got nothing and I've lost all credibility. I try again. "Detective Smith, have you had a sexual relationship with Miss Defendant?" As the Commonwealth rises to object and the judge starts to scold me, the detective goes, "Oh yeah, we've had sex. It just wasn't very romantic." Yeah, that's an interesting semantic difference there. Not a lawyer, but I witnessed my ex-wife try to argue with the judge that she couldn't be accused of kidnapping our daughter because her daughter was legally emancipated, not a spoiler, she wasn't, at the time of the kidnapping. My ex had legal statutes written on small sheets of paper she had torn out of books in the jail library, and she kept arguing with the judge after being told that none of it mattered. After the 5th time my ex interrupted the judge with her nonsense, the judge slammed her hands down, stood up, leaned over her bench, and told my ex that she had been a juvenile court judge for 20 years and was well aware of the statutes. If she interrupted one more time, then she would be held in contempt and spend several months more in jail. My lawyer held up his folder in front of his face to hide his grin during this exchange. I walked out with full legal and physical custody of my daughter, court-supervised visitation for my ex, and a full restraining order. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to say too much, but basically on charges of growing marijuana, stated he was growing herbs for medicine, and gestured air quotes with his hands, and then whispered, I kid you not, marijuana. Bro. You have the right to remain silent. What you lack is the capacity. Sat in on a personal injury case where the plaintiff broke their leg in an accident and had a doctor on the stand as an expert. The woman's lawyer begins questioning the doctor about their experience with leg injuries. He was a well-known orthopedic surgeon in the area. She asks if he's ever treated a tibia fracture, the leg bones are tibia and fibula, to which he only answers no. Then she starts grilling him with questions about the tibia. After 6 to 7 questions, she asks, how did you get a medical license and have been able to practice medicine this long if you've never treated a tibia fracture? And begins a small rant about going after his credentials and those that gave it to him, To which he simply responds, "There is no bone named the tibia." The lawyer became beet red and everyone in the room tried their best to keep from laughing, including the judge. Not a lawyer, but have been on a number of juries. Kid was being charged with arson in his high school. First sign of trouble, prosecutor is trying to get the investigator to say something specific. Note, this was a fire investigator. What did you see? It was a bathroom. Anything else? Sink? What else did you see? Mirrors? What else? Trash can? Anything in the trash can? Paper towels. Anything unusual about the paper towels? They were burned? Thank you. Then she calls the co-conspirator who had made a plea deal who, according to opening statements, will testify that the kid/defendant started the fire. The kid spoke and acted like a stoner. What happened? We had some aftershave, we got some paper towels and poured the aftershave on the towels. Then he lit them. Your Honor, I'd like a recess. End of trial. Oh, gotta love that. When I was a trainee solicitor, I watched one of my colleagues' trials. A couple of ne'er-do-wells accused of racially abusing their neighbor. First Crown witness comes in, gives her name, and starts answering questions about the incident in question. From the public gallery, I can see both accused whispering to each other in the dock, then gesturing urgently to their respective lawyer. My colleague asks for the witnesses to be taken out of court and back to the witness room, because something unusual has come up and we need to address you on it. To which the sheriff agrees. As soon as the door closes behind the witness, this relative bombshell is dropped. That witness is not who she says she is. I was shocked. After some investigation by the court police officer, it turns out that the actual witness didn't want to attend court, so got her friend to go and pretend to be her. She had a script in her pocket that she'd clearly been revising in the witness room beforehand. No prizes for guessing which particular racial stereotype was in play here. Unbelievably, no action was ever taken against either the witness or her understudy. Plenty of good moments as a defense lawyer, but that one stands out as a had no idea that was coming moment. Wow. Just seriously, wow. That was r/AskReddit, and if you want more content, you can click on either link on your screen right now. Now you guys stay safe, stay healthy, I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, stay beautiful, people.